thank you everybody for coming. Try not to cry a lot, but today is kind of emotional for me because it's not just the last lecture of the year, but as I think many of you know, this is going to be the last of the sort of regular free non-credit lectures that I've offered now for the past 9 years. And so I guess I'll probably come back to that again at the end as to all the various reasons why. But I will say that I'm not ending this because of any sense of failure or wrongdoing. Every one of these lectures, even if it's just been me and one other person talking about what's been happening and going on, has been quite important and valuable for me. The whole point of Hempology has been to educate people, whether that's broadly or individually, and these lectures have been very successful on many levels, and will continue to be for many years, which is partly why we've videotaped so many of these and put them up on YouTube for the last 9 years. We have a really interesting collection of speakers, Mark Emery before he went to jail, all sorts of people that have been involved in the industry, and certainly as well as myself, kind of documenting it as things have changed. And the goal of Hempology has been to educate the public to legalization. And this past weekend I did a convention at the University of British Columbia, the 4th one we've done over there. And just yesterday the newspaper came out with a quote from me that I think is really quite telling and poignant, where I started Hempology101 to educate the public so that they would be ready to legalize cannabis. Well, they're fucking ready. And so I feel in a lot of ways, while it's not legal yet, certainly here in Canada and around the world, my work has really been very successful, and I'm stepping out of this with my head high. And so I'll come back to it at the end again in terms of some of the reasons. I'm not quitting again because this is a failure. I'm quitting more because of personal reasons. My girlfriend is suffering a lot from cancer right now. It's very hard for me to be at these events, and it's going to be tougher when she's not around. And so I'm letting things go now so I can look after her and spend time with her.
And you've got the circle.
Pardon?
You've got the circle.
Yeah. No, and 420 will continue. It's just the end of these lectures. So again, I'll come back to this a bit more towards the end. I really wanted to spend most of this lecture talking of the history of Hempology, which isn't history at all. In some ways it's evolving, and again I'll come to that evolution towards the end here. But Hempology does have a rather fantastic history in my opinion, and I'll share it with you today. The beginnings of it, I wasn't even in British Columbia. The first Hempology101 event was actually Hemp101, and it was at Simon Fraser University in Burnaby, where actually Dana Larson, who's the lead in leading the Sensible BC campaign, and has been involved in multiple organizations since. But yeah, Dana Larson and Ian Hunter, actually, who was the original owner of Hemp-BC, or not Hemp-BC, Sacred Herb. He was actually co-owner of Hemp-BC with Mark Emery apparently, but then he moved over here and founded Sacred Herb after. But I guess the two of them and others had a conference at SFU, which included Professor Neil Boyd, a criminology professor at SFU, who's still active today, quoted often on this matter. And so I think it was about a year after that the manager of Hemp-BC, again Dana Larson's, not Dana Larson's, Jesus, Mark Emery's store, and Dana Rosiak, I think is how you said her last name. She was managing the store. She had an apartment across the street, and she opened up her apartment every Tuesday night to these Hempology 101 meetings, which were really quite wonderful gatherings of mostly young people, but some, that were in their 30s and 40s and on. But really a lot of young people really wanting to do something, and they'd share stories and information, and it's kind of more of a weekly show and tell than it was anything else, which was really quite fantastic. So I became involved in my like 2 months after these started, when I had barely moved to Vancouver from Ontario, and so I was very quickly, I heard about these meetings and attended some and just loved it, and immediately saw a couple of things that I thought Hempology brought to the table that were very attractive. I love the social atmosphere, that's for sure, and I've always tried to make sure that in a lot of my events and such, there's an ability for people to network and engage. That's always been a critical component of Hempology. But I for sure, saw the power of this plant. For myself, actually, not, I guess, medically at all. That was the furthest thing from my mind. And while I enjoyed using cannabis recreationally, what really was important to me initially was hemp. I'm a 7th-generation farmer on both sides in Ontario, mostly dairy farmer, but I'm the first generation kind of grew up in town. But farming is still very close to my heart and soul in many ways. And so when it occurred to me that essentially, the Fortune 500, Wall Street had just taken this plant away from my family and from the community at large, and that not only did my family and the farming community suffer as a result, but the entire world's environment is suffering as a result of this sort of chemical atmosphere that we've developed, as opposed to the more natural one that we could if we used hemp and other similar products. And so it occurred to me, pretty much right away when this whole reefer madness conspiracy became clear, that we really needed to embrace this plant and use it as much as possible in all of its aspects. And that what needed to happen first and foremost was to educate the public and to tell the story of the cannabis plant, that was critical, and that once the story was told, that the result would be legalization. That just seemed to be obvious, that once the truth is out there and everyone knows the facts, well then it would have to become legal. How could it be otherwise? And that really appealed to me, partly because I honestly do not like politics for various reasons. I'm so glad we're in a democracy, and really appreciate that other people engage in democratic institutions. I encourage voting for sure. I support individuals more than the parties. It seems this party mentality's kind of messed up, but I certainly much prefer democracy to living under a gun. And so I kind of took it for granted that we lived in that. And instead of fighting politics, I wanted to educate all the parties. That was, to me, the whole point, was that if the entire public was educated, then it didn't matter what party. So I've kind of avoided politics. In fact, initially I would tell people that politics, law, business, and religion were activities that I tried to stay away from as much as possible. It didn't always work that way, but that's been my goal. And so, so it occurred to me I had to write the Hempology 101 book, again, the complete comprehensive history of this plant. That was the most important thing for me. And I struck doing that. I was already writing books. I don't know if I was on 4 or 5 at that point. I've got 8 books now that I've written. None of them other published. I've actually even lost some of the physical copies of some of them. But anyway, I have most of them still. But I was writing. I was out of university. That was my goal in life, was to be a writer. So writing the history of hempology was, and cannabis seemed to be a perfect next step. not only did politics not fit me, but the big city of Vancouver didn't fit me either. I'm from a town of 250 people originally, but I grew up in the city starting at the age of 10. So I'm comfortable in the bush, the farm, or the city. But big cities I can handle, but living there wasn't for me. So it seemed an obvious step to move here from Victoria and build off of what was happening in Vancouver, because there was a lot of energy around what was happening with Mark Emery and Hemp BC. Cannabis culture, or Cannabis Canada as it was originally called, actually sort of sprung up from a combination of the Hempology meetings and Mark Emery and his drive. I was at the Hempology meeting that we came up with the name Cannabis Canada, because the Hemp and Marijuana newsletter didn't seem to be that appropriate, so we changed it to Cannabis Canada, eventually Cannabis Culture, because it could sell to the US more with that change of name. But I typed in the business directory in the first Cannabis Canada, collecting all sorts of information and stuff, and it was really an exciting time to be doing this sort of thing. And again, I moved to Victoria. Yeah, war stories. So some of this is more publicly known than others. I guess there's a lot of crazy stuff go on in this movement. Sometimes you're not aware of it as much as others. So when I moved here from Victoria, I had no idea some of the politics that had gone on in the movement. And apparently, Ian Hunter and Mark Emery didn't get along very well anymore. But I had no idea. So I showed up here in Victoria, walked into Sacred Herb saying, hey, I'm with Hempology101, kind of branching off of Vancouver. Well, Ian Hunter told everybody that I was like a spy from Vancouver, and that, not to really work closely with me. So I was having trouble getting stuff together over here, so I went back to Vancouver and asked Mark Emery for help, at which point he told me to go to Ian Hunter and get help from him. It's been, and that's actually softening it down. Actually, after I started the Cannabis Buyers Club, I came to Mark Emery and asked for some money to start up, get a office space, at which point he told me that doing education for free and selling medicine for no money at nonprofit is not only going to completely fail business-wise, will embarrass him and every other activist in the movement. The best thing I could do would be to quit what I was doing, go get a real job, buy more stuff at Hemp BC. And talked to him for a few years after that. I struggled. When I first moved here, I lived in a van, and I had these weekly meetings, I thought, to piggyback off the Tuesday nights in Vancouver. So I decided Wednesday nights here in Victoria. I had nowhere to go, so we just picked random places downtown. Eventually I found a few spots that worked quite well, and the combination of the two worked really quite well. I couldn't go to Vancouver every week, maybe once a month, but it was a good start. I also, right away, this September '95, got a club going here at UVic, and got a Clubs Day booth, and took it from there. We didn't have regular meetings for quite a while. In fact, the second public meeting I had here, the first one was actually a Cannabis Buyers Club meeting. The second one was a 420 on April 16th, which is the day that LSD was invented in 1943. So we've we did a whole day of events. We had speakers at the fountains from noon to 1, and then we played heavy metal, the old movie in the theater here, and that was like from 2 to 4, and then we had this crazy 420. This is a great story. So we had a 420 outside, and there's about 50 or 60 freaks. And at that point, most of my organized stuff was done. I figured we were supposed to have a 420. Then I told everybody we're going to go down to Willows Beach at the end of the day, which, was kind of silly because I'm new here. I didn't realize that was like Oak Bay police territory and stuff. But anyway, so we had our 420. And right at 420, I did 10 hits. I did one at noon and figured my day was over so I could get really high. And so I dropped the 10 hits, and then we moseyed on down to the beach one way or another. And so we're down there, and I lived in my van, and I was in the van in the parking lot, and somebody came up to me and told me that one of our friends, who's known as Spoon Man, was passed out lying on the ground. And so I told him I'd be there in a minute. But then the police drove through the parking lot, so we all got out of the vehicle and started walking to the back. And I warned everybody that the police were coming. However, Spoon Man was comatose, lying on the ground, with his eyes open but just not moving. And this was 7 o'clock at night. He was in a t-shirt. Like, you could tell he was not right. But the police saw him pretty quickly. We weren't on the beach. We were in some rocks. Anyhow, the police wanted to ask questions, and when they were not getting any answers from him or anyone else, they started to talk about calling for backup. At which point I realized I needed to intervene, no matter how stoned I was. And so I got on the ground, got on my knees, and started hugging him, and told the police, "No, you can't take him." And the police stopped, and they're like, "Wait, you can't tell us what to do. You know, we're going to do our job, and this man needs medical attention." At which point I said that he didn't need any help. Basically leave us alone. And they asked what was wrong with him, and I said nothing was wrong with him. He's on acid. We're all on acid. This is the anniversary of the first LSD trip. At which point the police officers realized that there's 30 people stoned around them, and they could pick up on the vibe, and they took a step back, and they're like, "Okay, wait a minute here," and proceeded to tell them about the effects of LSD, and that there was essentially nothing that they could do except give him time to ride it out, essentially, which would happen. There wouldn't be any permanent effects of the drug, but they needed to allow him to, like I say, have the trip proceed in the best way possible. That if he was, drugged up or tied down, that would actually make it a really horrible experience, and that we'll take care of him. At which point the police officer asked me what we could do for him that they couldn't, and I said we could love him. At which point everybody else chipped in, "Yeah, we could love him." The police officers went down and asked him if he was okay, asked him if he needed an ambulance. He said he was fine, didn't need an ambulance. I don't know how he responded, but he did. And so they left, and it was really quite something. So somebody else drove my van downtown, and he was in the back, and I guess everybody popped out, and then all of a sudden, Spoon Man's there. The curtain rod had fallen and hit him on the head and snapped him out of it. And so he jumps out of the van. I'm like, "Spoon Man, how are you doing?" "I need a fucking smoke." Just go. Anyhow, when I lived in my van, we had a lot of crazy times like that. It was a really wonderful time in my life that I'll never be able to relive in any sense. So I started doing the Wednesday night things, started to engage myself more in the activist community. I guess the first event that I held was International Medical Marijuana Day, big event. That would have been November 15th, 1995. We tried to coordinate with people in the United States, which has been 2 decades of just struggle because they've changed their dates. One year it's a week, the next year it's a day, but we tried to coordinate. Actually, we got a bunch of people to sign a pledge to help people with medical marijuana, and I spoke to the Victoria City Council, introduced myself at that point. I've actually made a presentation to Victoria City Council every year since. Did my last one just a couple of weeks ago. I've developed a really great relationship with them over time. In fact, the next year was awesome. So in '96 was when I started up the Cannabis Buyers Club. Got a pager and a pamphlet, and that story or history is a whole other tale to be told. But I was running the 2 groups, but it had been fairly quiet, a little bit of press, but not very much. Nothing in print anyway. And this was when, things were quite illegal. And so I was also at the time doing some youth work. In fact, in a year and a half from now, one of the reasons why I'm sort of stepping down some of my Hempology work is because I'm going to resurrect a youth center that I was with back in the days. And so I was known as a youth advocate by my name, Ted, but that's actually a nickname. My real name is Leon. And so when I spoke to City Council, I used my legal name, partly because I figured if I'm getting busted, and I assumed when I started the Buyers Club I was getting arrested a number of times, that was the only way I'd change the law. So it wasn't like a matter of if, it was like, let's make sure when I get arrested it's under the best circumstances possible. And so, you know, I was expecting to be arrested, and I figured I better use my real name for the Buyers Club and such, or otherwise, you know, there may be some confusion. So anyway, yeah, November '96, International Medical Marijuana Day was like the day before the election for City Council. And the old mayor, Bob Cross, from Cross's Meats, ran on a real law and order platform. Many of you may not remember, but back in the 90s, yeah, there's this kind of battle going on downtown, you could say, and Bob Cross was just pounding the police drum, more police, more enforcement, blah, blah, blah. And so here I get up 2 days before he's about to be reelected. I thanked the police department for their policy of non-enforcement. He didn't have a policy of non-enforcement. But I thanked him for it anyway. I held up some marijuana salve. I told the city council how good this marijuana salve was for patients, and told them I was selling cannabis to sick people in town, and that I had been doing it for 11 months, and that this was going to be a new you know, society that they would have to deal with. It was a really interesting experiment. I had several media come up to me right after I spoke. The room was packed. There's all sorts of other political things going on. So this was just like a bombshell that hit the room. It was really neat, the way that the whole room just about exploded when I did it. And I had, again, a few media come up and ask me questions after. But there was a virtual media blackout until 3 weeks after the election, at which point then I was on the front page of the Victoria News about the Cannabis Buyers Club being in town. And so, you know, it kind of spurred off International Medical Marijuana Day, but, you know, the two groups did, you know, work hand in hand, and still do in a lot of ways. Shit, I didn't even bring a newspaper. And so,
you want a copy?
Yeah, if you could, should show it off by the end here. So anyway, yeah, so Hempology, the weekly meetings downtown were just fantastic as well. You know, in a way, I've had my heyday with my downtown activism, and I wish we could bring it back, but it doesn't seem likely. The weekly Wednesday night meetings really took off to the point where around the year 2000, the average meeting would probably, thank you very much,
Yep.
have been about 150. And that's including in the winter. Like in the middle of the winter, I'd have, you know, 50, 60 people come out on some of the worst nights to smoke pot and chill out and do some crazy stuff. We would have, you know, in the summertime quite often, you know, 200. It was a really fun thing to do. Partly because I bring roach joints to all the meetings and pass them out. That's something I'm fairly well known for. And so, yeah, among the crazy stunts, we used to save up as many roach joints as we could and get people to pitch in, and we keep track of how much we were smoking. And so most weeks it would be an average of, you know, like 24 to 30 grams a week, but we would still be stockpiling for big special events so that we could break the records. I think the record for one night of roach joints is around 120 grams. I know we did over a quarter pound a couple times. And so there's a few, I remember one time the parking lot across from the courthouse, I have no idea what the occasion was, why we thought we'd break the record again. But I think that was the night I had 120 joints, and a lot of them were over a gram, just like big fat roach joints, and most people couldn't finish them. It was, yeah, it was kind of, but yeah, so we did that. There was some really fun activist nights. The funnest story I have was actually the 5th anniversary of Hempology101. Again, this was back in 2001. And so, or not even, no, this would have been 2000, yeah. Because this was before I got arrested or anything like that. So it's the 5th anniversary, and I wanted to do something that would be fun on top of what regular fun we had. I was actually selling pot cookies at Hempology back then. I was in need of money so much that I'd show up with literally a backpack full of cookies and get everybody to line up, and I'd sell just 1 cookie per person and just sell them as quickly as I could when I arrived. And so yeah, I didn't do that a lot, but I needed the cash, what can I say? And so yeah, so I had pot cookies arranged to be sold in Beacon Hill Park, but I wanted to do more than that. And then I found out that I think it was like the 21st annual Global Crime Stoppers association was meeting at the Empress that week. They had like a 3-day meeting. And this was like the top think cops for all around the world, right? Like Crime Stoppers is not your average police group. And so the Empress, though, it's private property, right? You can't just show up there and protest. But I thought I'd dig around. So went to I guess incognito and just kind of poked my nose around to find out that they were having a evening meal on the Wednesday night at the BC Museum, which isn't private property. And it wasn't publicly known that they were meeting there. But I was able to just find out actually from a couple of the women whose husbands were there. They didn't know who I was. Anyhow, so we started at 420 Beacon Hill Park. Then we marched to the ledge where Betty Krawchuk was camped out. Many may remember this grandma who at one point camped out at the ledge for the trees, literally, and it was there for, I think, maybe over a month even at the time. And we're talking, she's like 70 or something, living at the front, living on the lawn. Anyway, she was there. I gave her a chance to speak to the crowd. I thought about what she was doing, but instead she just bashed the war on drugs, which is just great, because here's this very well-dressed, articulate grandma at the ledge just bashing the war on drugs for us. So when we were done that, we went down to City Hall and had a session down at City Hall. And then I think the plan was just to turn around and march back to the park with one brief stop at the BC Museum. And so when this was when we were actually, yeah, I said it wasn't 2000 wasn't the peak. No, 2002, 2003 was, right? Yeah. So we were about 100 strong or so, but we weren't even to the point where we had signs or anything, right? So the only way you could tell it was a pot rally was because of the smoke, right? And so we had a police escort actually to the BC Museum. We were taking up part of the street, part of Douglas. We had one of the 2 lanes blocked off because we were so big, and they were giving us a lot of room. And then all of a sudden the police were gone when we got to the BC Museum. We didn't know it, but they were going to arrest this little grandma at the Parliament buildings. Every police officer in town was there, and they completely deserted us, which was just great, because they didn't know where we were going, right? They thought we were just going to Beacon Hill Park. And so yeah, so all of a sudden we're at the BC Museum. The 2 security that came out were just stunned. They really didn't know what to do. At first, because there was no one even really to approach. It was just this mob of people smoking pot in front of the museum all of a sudden. And so I had after a minute of that, I went over and told them who I was and what was going on. At which point they told me we had to leave because it was public property and we weren't allowed to be there. At which point I said, well, if it's public property, I know we're allowed to be here. And they're like, well, there's nothing going on anyway. And I'm like, well, I thought there was this, meeting of police from around the world. Meanwhile, the police officers were like covering their name tags while they were walking in. And so while these security guards were denying that there was a police association meeting, I had people behind me going, no, Ted, this one's a cop. Yeah, this one's a cop. And so the security, after a few minutes, were like, you guys just got to go. And I'm like, okay, just let me plug in my amplifier so I can tell everybody that we got to leave. So, hey everybody, happy anniversary! We get on the amplifier and, talk for a minute. The security guards are like, oh no, they just left. So I turn around, oh okay, I guess they don't care anymore. Talk for a few minutes, at which point all of a sudden, check news. Bam, well, I'm on camera. Okay, well, better go back over everything. So welcome everybody to the anniversary and Hempology101, and this is who we are. And the back of my head, when I do public speaking, I've done so much, I actually can have a conversation with myself while I'm talking. And so the back of my head, I'm thinking, okay, what's the punchline, Ted? Like, what are you trying to get the message across? The news is going to cut it down to a short piece. And it came out, like the truth often does, Crime Stoppers is scum. The whole group just went dead silent. And then this huge yeah came up. And so front news that evening and the next day was Betty's arrested and Crime Stoppers are scum. It was great. And got us a lot more exposure. And I don't even think the local police took it that bad because it was Crime Stoppers we were picking on. But it's a funny irony to the end of the night because we went from there to Beacon Hill where I sold cookies and had the regular Hempology circle. And then we played our one and only game of Capture the Flag. Just after midnight, I was going around the back of the park in a place called, I think it's Queen's Pond, and stepped around the corner of a building and stepped into a duck pond and was into scum up to here. And standing there thinking, well, who's the scum now, buddy? Anyhow, that was another really fun evening. And so, like I say, a lot of times Hempology has been as much about the social aspect of bringing together, and there's a real empowering feeling that comes from being out in public and smoking and being in defiance of this law, and it's something that to me has been a critical component as much as the education, and so that's been a drive. So Hempology, we had the meetings. I guess it was shortly after that, though. I guess maybe I did piss somebody off because it was like 2 months after that I got arrested. First up here at UVic, November 8th of that year, they sent undercovers to the 420 to pretend to be students and put roaches in their pocket. I was pretty sure that we had undercovers at the meetings leading up to that. In fact, I seem to recall looking right at some of these officers while I was passing the joints out, going on about how trafficking, being simply passing a joint, was the most absurd law in the Canadian books, and that it would be one that I would be happy to challenge because it's just absurd that we would be treated so poorly for passing something so beneficial around. But as it were, they were just doing their job. So for whatever reason, instead of arresting me at the circle, though, they arrested me in the parking lot. One of the more poignant moments that really says a lot about Hempology was after I got arrested, the head of campus security approached me, gave me his business card, which I still have, and told me that I would not be allowed back on campus until the end of the criminal proceedings. Okay. Yeah, so I told him I would be back teaching before he retired. I'd never met Hunter McDonald before that, and it was a couple of years before I was allowed back on campus, a bit over 4. But ironically, Hunter not only was working here when I began teaching this free non-credit lecture series, but he shortly after retired, and he actually joined Law Enforcement Against Prohibition in his retirement. He not only worked here, but he was retired RCMP, and he came and spoke at the 10th annual Cannabis Convention, and basically apologized for his role in my arrest here at the university. And it was something that got in the Times Columnist and a lot of attention because it was so ironic that one of the head people arresting me was actually helping me. And so, yeah, so I was arrested for sharing the joints up here. And then 1 week after, I was arrested trying to give out 420 pot cookies downtown. The year before, actually on International Medical Marijuana Day, I had gotten away with giving out 101 pot cookies downtown. It was quite the stunt. I'd only came up with it, I think, on the Friday night, because I knew International Medical Marijuana Day was coming, and I wanted to come up with something that would grab attention. And so, like, I think Friday night, I'm like, hey, I should have a pot cookie giveaway. And the thing was happening on Monday. So I think I literally, like, made a couple phone calls. I think the only news that covered it beforehand was the queue. So I was on the queue, you know, and everybody got to hear pot cookie giveaway at the library at noon. But other than that, it was completely word of mouth. And so the first one was really kind of neat, because a police officer, this is in the downtown public library, and there's a big square with this big piece of art in the middle and 4 corners with garbage cans and circles to hang out in there. So I was at the one, and I put the cookies out all over the flower bed. And this was at noon in the middle of the day with the library, right? So it's kind of, lots happening. But a lot of people gathered. I had all the media there, so this was on the front page of the Times Columnist, and I think it was when we just had one TV station, and Michael Timchuk from CBC Radio did an awesome interview. He won an award, actually, for the segment that he did from my pot cookie giveaway. And part of it was because there was a police officer standing on the other side of the whole event, watching me tell everybody, you know, I'm giving out pot cookies. These are pot cookies. These are the effects that you could expect from them. This is how to make them. You know, I kind of did this whole speech with, you know, well within earshot of the police officer. And he just, oh yeah, there's a uniformed and the Victoria spokesperson, Mike something. It's been a while. So anyway, the 2 police officers, I should say, but the uniformed one was the one the press were all going to. The other guy was avoiding the media. And yeah, so he couldn't have been the press spokesperson at the time. I think he became press spokesperson after, but anyhow, the police officer told the news at the time that I wasn't being arrested because when THC is cooked, it can't be analyzed, and therefore they can't arrest me. They actually, yeah. I tried to use that in court, but it wouldn't work, because the year after I thought, hey, if the police can't analyze it, it can't be busted, we're having a fucking pot cookie giveaway. So I showed up with 420 and had a little bit more press leading into it, and they weren't going to let that happen. So I was arrested, actually still getting the cookies out of the car. One of the tins just opened a little bit, so Lars, as many know him by, Darren Lars, saw some of the cookies come out of the tin, so he got to arrest me right then and there. And so the highlight for me of that was partly that when we were in the cells that night, he kept asking me questions about the cookies, what the effects of the cookies were, and how they were made, you know, how much was in them, all that sort of stuff. And, you know, I tried to describe the effects to him, but I kept encouraging him, like, you just gotta try one, right? Like, you know, you don't know until you try it. And sure enough, 37 cookies went missing in the police station. I got charged with 383 cookies. I had 420 cookies. I worked 3 solid days. I counted them twice, but the judge wouldn't buy that either. So anyhow, yeah, so up at the UVic, I ended up getting a $500 fine for trafficking. And the cookie giveaway, I ended up getting a 1-day sentence. I had some options, you know, community service and stuff, but the 1-day jail sentence meant it was dealt with right away, that there would be nothing hanging over my head, no reporting or anything after. And so when you get sentenced to a day in jail, when you're in court, they actually just send you to the cell for a couple hours while you get processed and back out. And funny enough, they threw me in a cell with somebody that was just getting out that knew me, who was so excited to see me because he's getting out of jail. It's like, wow, he's in jail with a celebrity all of a sudden, and he just chatted. That 2 hours went by like that. I am a cookie convict now. I've done time for giving out cookies, so it's a badge of honor, no matter how absurd it may be. And so one of the ironies of getting arrested first here at UVic and then the pot cookie giveaway the next week was that really before that, I was a very poor guy, you know, living pretty much on the streets, very little resources, not very well known. Being arrested has been some of the best things that have ever happened to me. It has really brought a lot of attention to my work. It has, you know, I guess proven to many people that I mean what I say when I do this work, that it's not just about, you know, getting attention. I'm more than willing to go to court and fight. In fact, that's what I see needs to be happen. That, you know, honestly, if every pot smoker in this country decided that they were going to get arrested for cannabis as soon as possible, you know, that they'd be flooded. They wouldn't be able to handle that at all. And it would become very obvious how absurd that these laws would be. And so I think one of the things I've done is prove like it really doesn't hurt you a lot going through that.
Your arrest, does that deter you from getting into the States?
It does. So that's a cost that people have to measure.
Yeah, but you can still go anywhere else.
Yeah, just went to Jamaica last year. Didn't bug me there at all. The States is the only country in the world that's like that.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be fallen very soon, you know. So yeah, that, and like I say, you know, if everyone was willing to stand up like that, the better. But that's not the point of Hempology, but that's been certainly a stance of myself. So yeah, so we've done all sorts of things. I have tried and so many different kinds of events over the years, some more successful than others, and they've been a heck of a lot of fun. We've done a lot of conventions. I may have mentioned we've done now 15 here at the university, one-day forums where we get a whole bunch of speakers together. They've been pretty awesome. And then I've done 4 over here or 4 at UBC. I just did one on the weekend. I figure in total between the downtown meetings, the lectures, board meetings and stuff, I've probably organized about 3,500 cannabis rallies or you know, opportunities for people to gather and do things. And I guess that's partly why I feel like I've done my stint a bit, you know. And it's time to kind of help you know, keep what I've you know, made alive, help it grow and form into the new world. But for the most part, I've put my time in there.
Who are you passing your torch off to?
Well, there's a lot of different torches to pass on here. So I'm not exactly passing the whole thing over to one person. And some things are going to come up that are new and fresh. For example, the UBC club that I've mentioned a few times. It was a real struggle getting a club for Hempology over there at all. Now we have executive students that are ready, willing, and able to carry it forward and have all sorts of types of events and put out literature, and you know, they need very little guidance anymore over there. Here at UVic, in terms of the 420s and the students that kind of help, you know, it's hard for me to say. We'll see what happens next September. We'll definitely keep the 420s going. But you know, it's hard for me to you know, say who will be, you know, doing anything more. It may be that the 420s are about all the club does up here for a while. There's opportunities to do a lot more, but I don't know who's going to do that. We have a board of directors for Hempology101, and they're right now discussing a number of different things that they may be able to keep doing. One of the things I haven't mentioned yet is the game show. I have the world's only cannabis game show called Reach for the Pot. I'm going to be playing it with the students here this afternoon. I'll be playing that occasionally at different big events and stuff, but I think for the last 9 years, this would have been the 10th year that I've done a tournament with like 32 players. I get 8 teams, and the winning team would get trophy bombs, 4 players, and it's something that's filmed and up on YouTube and everything. I'm not going to be able to keep doing the tournament. It seems as though one of the board members, Marcus, has the nerve and the energy to try to keep the game show together. He won't be pulling a tournament off, no, but he'll be playing the game, and we'll be able to sponsor him with some prizes. And so, and in fact, the Wednesday night meetings
that we used to have. Yeah, we used to have them every week, I guess, until about 7 years ago. I quit them because it was really hard to have a focus because so many kids showed up to party every week, because they created a space that was basically cop free, that we could almost do what we wanted, and some young people took advantage of that. And because the focus was on me, I wasn't getting a lot of help managing the rest of it. And I actually got assaulted and threw a kid in jail and decided that was going to be the end of the weekly meetings. But I did keep the game show going, and we played that every spring. It may be now that the Wednesday night meetings downtown get resurrected, but almost more like it was when I showed up in the first point, where it's like a group doing it, and a group managing it, and a group discussion, instead of it being led by me and me doing most of the talking. Although, so there may be a game show, but also there may be, other activities come out of the Wednesday night meetings. In fact, one of the things that's happened as well, my friend Owen Smith, who was the baker arrested in the trial for the Buyers Club, no longer works at the Buyers Club. He's actually a full-time employee of Hempology now. And so he's got a whole bunch of ideas of things that he may be able to put together. He's got a radio show, and so Owen and I are certainly working as a team with Hempology to produce things. So the switch for Hempology at this point is likely from a little bit less stuff happening here locally to more stuff happening online, and I should say more stuff happening too with the Cannabis Digest, because I guess the Digest has become my main focus now as well. It really started off as a newsletter for the Cannabis Buyers Club. Again, not to get into the history of that too much, but that club was raided in 2002, 2003, 4 times. And so we wanted to inform our membership about the police raids, about what was happening with politics. There's this emerging medical marijuana program the patients needed to be kept up with. So the first one is actually literally like a white piece of paper that was folded once to make it into 4 pages. That was the first Cannabis Digest. And it was just basic information about what we were doing and other clubs in Canada. And we grew the newsletter a little bit for a number of years. And then it certainly helped out with the club in all sorts of different ways. But it also fulfilled Hempology's mandate a bit more, educating the public. We distributed this. At first, I think we printed 5,000 of a couple issues, but then we went to 10,000 fairly quickly. And back when the Buyers Club was mine, I could spend as much money as I wanted on this, and I spent a lot shipping this newspaper across the country, trying to inform people about what was happening. And then what happened? Or sorry, before that happened, Cannabis Culture stopped printing, and then Owen got arrested, and that's when we turned it into the newspaper, I should say. And so, that was 3.5 years ago that all went down, and so we changed it into this format, started to print a lot more, and get advertisers in. It's taken like 3 years, but the next issue is actually going to be pretty darn close to paying for itself, which I'm really proud of, to find a self-sustaining newspaper while so many other publications have been going down. And so we found a really good niche with this. I should mention as well, a couple of years ago, I finally got the 4th edition of Hempology101 out. The first 3 editions are quite rare now. I guess I made 100 copies, all on hemp paper, just photocopied them. I got holes punched in the side and bound it together with hemp twine. And actually, the first year, before I started the Buyers Club, I thought I was going to tour across Canada in my van and sell these handmade books on hemp paper. And when I ran out of books, I'd simply photocopy more and then move on to the next town. And so that didn't come to fruition, but certainly this did. And so it, like I say, is the most comprehensive book on the history of this plant, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm very proud of it. And there it is. And so
Where can we get
Oh, I sell them for $20. They are available in stores in town. Or if you ever go to the Cannabis Buyers Club on Johnson Street, they're $20 there. That's the cheapest, easiest place to get them, I think. Yeah, so right now Hempology has weekly or monthly board meetings, normally the first Tuesday of the month, but next Tuesday it's canceled till the following Wednesday. So I think Wednesday, April 9th is our next board of directors meeting. And so it'll be really interesting to see how things grow from here as I kind of step back and let a lot more people get involved in different ways. It is rather ironic in all sorts of ways that I'm pulling back from Hempology101 at this point. One of the reasons, honestly, is because it's becoming legal. I see that happening now. It's definitely inevitable. Stephen Harper could get reelected, and I'm telling you that the United States is going to be legal very soon, and it will be absurd for Canada to remain that way if the United States and the rest of the world has made it legal. You know, there's a lot at play here leading towards these things, which I'm very certain of. And so a lot of people, especially these licensed producers in this medical marijuana program, are becoming involved because they see the money. And this is the most valuable resource that we have, this plant. It's green gold, literally. It's just very precious to us. This has a lot of resources, and in some ways the market is distorted right now because prohibition's kept the prices very high for consumers, which has really sucked. So it'd be really nice to see those prices come down, and there isn't as much money to be made as some may think. But there is a green rush happening right now. And in a lot of ways, as I said earlier, I feel like my work is done. I didn't get into this for money. In fact, if you look at my history, I've gone out of my way not to make money at times. I've avoided asking for donations when I should be asking for donations. I've done so much for free. I didn't even get a paycheck this month, because normally I get $500 a month from Hempology, but we haven't sold enough books or gotten enough donations for me to even get a paycheck. But that's not been the point. That's not why I got involved in this. I got involved in this to teach people about this plant so that it would become legal. And again, we're there, and in so many ways I feel like I've accomplished that. And now, in order to get attention and do things, I've got to compete and work with a whole new industry that is different. When I started this 18 years ago, 19 years ago, the only people trying to legalize cannabis really cared about cannabis. They didn't think they were going to be making money off it. They wanted us to stop being arrested for us. That was the point. Now, it's ironic. So much has changed. People made fun of me when I started Hempology, or doing Hempology, 19 years ago almost now. It was something that, the vast majority of people never thought it would be legal, thought it was an absurd idea. Now people make fun of me because the States is doing it first. It's changed. And so on in the big picture, certainly, I feel like it's time for me, at least personally, to move on, and for Hempology to grow beyond what it has done under my leadership. As I said, though, the newspaper is certainly something that I'm very committed to doing, and in a lot of ways is taking it to that next level. And I can do a lot of that online without all my weekly meetings. And so it's something that will more than keep me busy and involved in the movement. But I can see myself pulling back here, at least with the amount of time I spend for different reasons. But like I say, the irony is that I'm ending sort of at the height of my work. Next Tuesday, less than a week today, I'm having a press conference and rally on Parliament Hill to fight the changes in the medical regulations. And I've got the lawyer, John Conroy, from the injunction that was successful a week ago in Vancouver. We're flying him to Ottawa to directly discuss this issue with the national press in Ottawa. Again, we're kicking Stephen Harper in the head next week in a way that is bigger and grander than anything else that I've ever been able to accomplish. And also a movie, Kid Cannabis, should be coming out next month that I was featured in with my book. And so in a very interesting way, next month could be the most successful month of my career. It will be. I'll be getting more attention and doing more work to educate the public about cannabis and its benefits than I have in my entire career. That being said, April 20th will probably be the last event that I put my energy into. Again, not because I've failed, not because I don't believe in what I'm doing, but really I need to look after my partner, as I said earlier. And it breaks my heart to be at these events without her anymore. And it's as simple as that. I just can't do it. I really appreciate all the support that everyone has shown me over all of these years and in these activities. I obviously couldn't have done it without the support that I've had. I wouldn't have done it without the support that I've had. And I just want to thank everybody that's here or watching for that. And I greatly appreciate it. And yeah, I'm very proud of everything that we as a group have accomplished. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming to the last lecture here.
When is the birth date of LSD again?
April 16th.
1942.
Yeah. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day, and smoke with you on.
What time Wednesday at the Charlie Shelley? What time Wednesday at the
Oh, sorry, no, it's next Tuesday, and it's in Ottawa at the Parliament Building. They'll be having a rally here. I guess Bones is trying to organize one at the courthouse, I think at noon as well. Yeah, so noon at the Victoria Courthouse next Tuesday. But yeah, no, I'm doing mine on Parliament Hill, actually. Thanks for keeping an eye on that, guys.